Hello, welcome to 2D Game Art for Developers. Today we'll take a look at gradients to see how you can use gradients to give your artwork a little bit more variety and life. Let's say you want to create a new scene for your game. Uh, so let's create a new artboard which is big enough to hold the scene, and say you want to create a sky. The sky has to be some shade of blue. Say, let's say something like this. Okay, now that's the artboard color. So let's switch back to, okay, let's switch to the rectangle tool and we drag out something like this. And let's say now you'll notice these two circles here, which the outer circle, this one controls the stroke for your shapes, and this circle controls the fill color. So at the moment the fill color is set to none, instead of which let's select something like this. Now this could be taken as the sky, but it's kind of bland because it's a uniform color. So what if you wanted the sky to have a color gradient? You can do that fairly easily using the gradient tool, which is right over here. You select the gradient tool, drag up, and as you notice, you get a variance in the color. Now the top circle here controls the topmost color in the gradient, and the bottom circle controls the bottommost color, and this slider down the middle controls how the gradient progresses. So let's adjust this a little bit. We want a lighter blue, something like somewhere here. Yeah. So now the sky has some character, right? Uh, and what about the ground? We could do something grass-like maybe. So let's try this again. We I clicked outside the artboard to deselect everything so that a color change will not affect what I'm doing. So let's select something like this for the green. We draw another rectangle, and let's say we want to give that a gradient as well. So we go back to our trusty gradient tool. Okay, but the colors, now it looks as if we probably need the darker green at the top, but this is reversed. You could simply drag the gradient circles to rotate the gradient, and you'll notice that if you do it this way you get a sideways gradient. So you can control the direction of the gradient as well as the topmost color and the bottommost color fairly easily by dragging the gradient circles to a specific location. Now let's say we want to change the bottom color. So we select this here, select something like this, and as you notice the green changes. Okay, so we have our sky, we have our ground. Let's say we want to add the sun. We need to get the circle shape, but before we do any drawing, let's change the color again. But if I change the color now like this, the color of the ground will change because the ground shape was selected. So I'm going to undo that, deselect things, change the color, and as you notice, no changes occur here. Now let's get the circle and we draw out a circle. Okay, we have our sun. That yellow is not very good, so let's change to something a little bit warmer. Okay, that's better. Now let's say we want the sun to be orange in the center but gradually become yellower as it gets towards the edges. How do you do that? You could do that again with a gradient tool. So you just select this, go like this, and up here you will notice that when the gradient tool is selected, there's a drop down indicating the type of gradient. At the moment it's set to linear, but if you select the drop down, you see there's one called radial, and if you select that, you get a radial gradient instead of a linear gradient. Now let's go back and change the colors. We want the inner color, the outer color to be the warm yellow, and let's say the inner color is going to be orange. Okay, now that looks better, doesn't it? And again you can adjust uh, the intensity of the gradient and which color has prominence by simply dragging this slider on the gradient tool. And of course there are other tools, like there's options to rotate the gradient here or to reverse the gradient, uh, and you can also use one of the other gradient types here to get various different effects, uh, but we have the basic sun, but the sun looks a little off without any rays, so why don't we add some rays to the sun? Let's select the triangle tool and drag out, and you'll notice that it comes with the gradient that we selected, because that's the currently selected color. As you'll notice here, it's set to the last gradient that we used, uh, or the last color we used. So we have this ray of sunshine, let's say, but it's using a radial gradient. But do we want it to be like that? No. Let's say we want the gradient to be linear on this, and so we'll set it to linear here, and then you notice that it goes something like that. But if you want the white to be, the yellow to be at the edges and orange to be at the bottom, you can simply use this, which reverses the gradient, and then let's say we drag this out and we can rotate the ray and set it up something like this. But you'll notice that it looks kind of odd because uh, the the rays don't seem to come out properly from the sun, circle of the sun. But that can be easily fixed. We can simply drag the ray behind the sun and it looks better. Now the thing is, we can create more rays by duplicating the existing one, like this, or rather like this, and we can simply rotate that into place. But let's say we weren't happy with the gradient colors at this point and we needed to change things. We'd have to change each of the rays individually. We'd have to change. Let's take this, go to the gradient tool, select the bottommost color, let's say the lower end of the gradient, and we'd have to change that to something. And then let's say we have to change this, which results in another color selection, and we'd have to do the same thing again here. And while it's fine for two rays, if you have like 5 to 6 different rays to deal with, that can become fairly time consuming. But there's a better way to do this with Affinity Designer. uh, what you do is you create a symbol from this. Symbols are a new feature which was added in Affinity Designer, I think maybe 1.5. Uh, so you need the symbol palette in order to create symbols. Usually you would go to View, Studio, and select symbols from there. I already have the symbol palette over here, so I can simply go here, and since I have an object selected here, I can simply say create, and I get a symbol here. I can name the symbol by simply going here and say rename and call it sun ray. Okay, so I now have a symbol. I can simply drag out another copy of the symbol and place it as I want. And let's say I needed to change the colors. If I go to the layer palette, you will notice that there's this indicator of sun ray symbol, and within that you have a triangle. The topmost one has a slightly a gradient line, whereas the inner one has a filled line indicating that that's the object and this is the symbol. So if you make any modifications to the symbol at the symbol level, when you have it selected here, it affects all instances of that symbol on the same. So let's say I select the symbol, I go to the fill tool, sorry, not the fill tool, the gradient tool, and set the type to linear, and change it a little bit. As you notice, the change was made immediately to both instances of the symbol. So now all I have to do is select the color I wanted, which is not that one, which is more like this, and then set the topmost color, thing like this. And now you have two copies of the symbol which work exactly the same, and I can simply make more copies. And complete my sun. and you will notice that I can modify each copy of the symbol to have different shapes, different rotation, different scale, etc., and it all still works fine. With there are no issues with that affecting the other copies of the symbol. Okay, so let's just drag this out a little bit. And there is your sun. Looks good, right? So there are other variations of this technique that you can use. For instance, like let's say you want an apple, or as the original tutorial did, a pumpkin, in which case you could probably do something like this. That doesn't look very much like a pumpkin, does it? But basically I want to get into the whole gradient issue, where you could set the gradient to uh, elliptical, and you can control the gradient. It's gradient spread by dragging these two lines. Like you can have an elliptical gradient which fills a specific space as much or as little as you want, and give the use of color a little bit of character instead of it being just flat. So there's a lot of stuff you can do here to experiment with gradients and see how it all works. So enjoy and have fun, and if you create something really good, let me know. See you in the next lesson. Bye bye.